Oh, the big Dune piece. Now, this one is going to be potentially annoying, yet here I go. Is it one of the greatest movies of all time? Maybe. When connected with the first as one single film, probably. Is it the perfect adaptation? Not necessarily. Did it deliver Dune to the masses who might not prefer to read many novels without betraying the integrity of the novel? Certainly. Would a stricter adaptation of the novel have been not only even more filmic, yet risky, a horror for the producers, a potential commercial whimper, and an even better film overall, even more so one of the greatest films of all time? Sure, I would assume so. We have to accept that this might be the most viable live action rendition of Herbert's Dune, barring an animated feature, a feature directed by Yoshiyuki Tomino, Katsuhiro Otomo, or Nobuo Ishiguro, in their peaks, that were strictly faithful to the book would be utterly godly. That could possibly be realised in the land of desired prophets. I'm in awe that the adaptations are as faithful and respectful to the source as they are. Lynch's film wasn't a desecration of the novel's ideals, though one might not enjoy the film for whichever reason, although certainly reduced their magnitude and awe-inspiring universality. The fact is, many a busy parent or worker who hasn't the time or motivation to read novels, and that is their choice, can now sufficiently experience the appeal of the work via these two features from Villeneuve. Not that Lynch's Dune is not without its positive attributes. I'm still very fond of that film personally, although its theatrical cut alienates non-fans tremendously, and the extended cut is more forgiving of those unfamiliar with the initial text, though still not for everyone. More than one might expect, barring odd production values, many an audience put up with what might otherwise have been considered too dense or expository texts in Jackson's Lord of the Rings. I am very excited to see Dune Messiah the day it arrives. Might even see it in a cinema. Yes, maybe I will. I like to think it could be the most interesting of the three, realizing some of the odd developments in the sequel novel from Herbert. Visually, I'm sure it will be a marvel, and Villeneuve has claimed he only wants to compose it if he feels it is superior, or at least could be, to Dune Part 2, and from what we understand, he is going ahead on the project. I like to think that in the long run it will be Villeneuve's Dune Messiah which will be the major cinematic event of the three. But until then, I'll be watching both of these back to back quite a few times, making up for lost time, thinking what I'd do, how much I would just sit back and watch an ideal Dune adaptation, and for the most part, I think, here it actually is. Things I don't like. Where is Fu for Hawat? Fair enough, cut him for time, but he was possibly my favourite character in the book, so I feel slightly sore about that. The Lady Jessica isn't as compelling a character as she was in the book, although the rendition in these films is still quite good in effort. I wish they had gone for a less chrome art design and something closer to the novel's purported decor and visual art culture, but again, they had to meet it halfway for producers and for more general audiences. However, I am concerned that modern sci-fi big-budget films are scared of the, say, plot-hole-hungry internet and are overly concerned with internal realism, when Herbert's universe, as far as I'm aware, was pretty airtight where that was concerned, unless I'm mistaken. Use his art design too, for goodness sake. For what it's worth, the slightly meagre, though not unlikable entirely, John Harrison miniseries is the closest to the novel's described art, decor, and design. Speaking of the culture of this universe, the music, why does it sound like a mildly hack Hollywood composer take on Orientalesque, epic so-called music? It doesn't feel alien or strange or different, only superficially so. I wish it were more John Hassel, or just genuinely Middle Eastern, or just actually original, unusual scores that represent the music that the respective cultures would listen to, but no, can't scare off the executives, they flee from brazen originality like it's a worm sign. Not sure how keen I am on Chalamet as Paul. I get that he was meant to look 16. Paul is meant to be 16 in the novel, and us imagining him as looking older is our heads accounting for how ahead of his age he is in the text, but maybe the Muad'Dib looks too much like a pretty boy. Maybe Chalamet, gruffly somber, slightly whispers all of his dialogue too much. Paul in the novel had some pride as a duke's son, and then as a duke when Leto had passed on. But maybe the film wanted to explore more of a character arc. Not sure. I might have wanted a little more Fremen versus Harkonnen action in part two. One, because they could fill it in. That's much of what they have left to adapt in the novel, and a lot of it is off screen anyway in the text, but also because at least a couple of dialogue scenes effectively occur twice. I understand one needed to ensure an audience, especially unfamiliar with the text, understood the seriousness of certain narrative concepts, and how difficult and expensive it would be to include even one major big action scene, one more I mean, but I just want to see more Fremen kick more Harkonnen ass. Is this too much to ask? More things I like. The cinematography in general, especially in part 2, is just magnificent. The action is quite splendid all throughout both. Lots of strong cast members. Oscar Isaac was memorable, Skarsgård was very sinister, Sharon Duncan Brewster as Kynes was a fascinating rendition. Zendaya as Chani seems to talk a little too much like a contemporary young Earth human than a Fremen, but otherwise she is quite commendable and absurdly gorgeous, but I was already a little bit in love with novel Shani, to be fair, and novel Jessica, but that's adolescent daydreaming for you, hey. Austin Butler's Fade Rafa was chilling, and I was surprised they managed to get actual sandworms. Can they teach me how to ride one? They were great actors, followed commands extraordinarily well. Is Dune. Actually seeing it is incomparable, and whilst I always liked Lynch's Dune simply for the joy of seeing the great American novel there on screen, Villeneuve outdid him and then some more. Again, doesn't reduce the brevity of the novel's gravitas, the things it could not match with the text. Perhaps the prose medium can accomplish things without dialogue which films have a harder time conveying without getting too avant-garde, psychedelic, or convicted non-narrative for at least a few minutes or so. It commits to a high standard which other feature film adaptations of major original sci-fi works better sit down and learn to try and match, at least relative to their own source materials. Check out my videos on Dune 84 or 21 for my elaborated thoughts on both. Check out me reading the original text under the playlists tab, but most importantly, pre-order your Dune Messiah ticket as soon as possible. Let's make that the highest grossing film of all time. No reason we shouldn't.